We're good to go?
It shows that it's still preparing to stream.
Okay. Sorry. Again.
And folks, we are streaming, so I am here. My camera's off. Let me know if you need me.
Thanks,
You're good to go.
Right, welcome, everyone. Good to see all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to start by acknowledging that many of us are gathered on the territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, who are collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. And this land is also covered by the Williams Treaties of 1923, with the Williams Treaties First Nation, including the Chippewa Tri-Council, Rama Nation, Gosele Nation, and Georgina Island Nation. And I like to remind myself as a settler that, especially when we're talking about sustainability and the environment, that Indigenous people have been stewards of this land since time immemorial, and that the colonial violence that has happened on this land and continues to happen here needs to be addressed, and we all have a role in that renewed relationship that we need to rebuild. So thanks for being here, everyone. Let's get started. So the first item is a standing item, and that's the Crompton Park Subcommittee. Not sure if, Anne-Marie, there's any update for the committee today, but you can take it away.
Yeah, so just an invitation to members of Active Transportation. We're gonna start doing some walkthroughs of Crompton. So if anyone's interested in appreciating that space, if you haven't been there, let me know. We'll do that as a safe distance in small groups, of course, but I'll reach out to you, Al, specifically, and some others we've discussed through that small working group about being a part of that conversation. So that will happen this week. I run an invitation to try and get some dates and time set. That would probably take about, a 20-minute walk or less, but it might help to generate some ideas. And that will then go in hand with engagement of residents at a local level. And then we'll bring back some themes to that small working group.
That's great. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Any questions from members of the committee? Not seeing any. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to the next item. This is one that's been on the agenda for a while. We just haven't gotten a chance to actually have the conversation. It's more just a conversation starter. So it's looking at bus stop pollinator gardens. And I see that Mike McConnell from Barrie Transit is here. So I'm not sure if he has any thoughts to introduce this conversation, if this is something the city's looked at in the past or considered, or what is the deal with bus stops? It's my understanding that it's, we have a contract with the advertising company, so maybe there's some complications there or maybe some opportunities. So Mike, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, not a problem. Just provide a bit of insight. We have taken a look and we've talked to our shelter suppliers because we are aware that some countries like the Netherlands, they have bus stop pollinators on top of their shelters. So unfortunately, we've talked to our shelter supplier and it's quite expensive and quite rare. They've done one for an agency in California. That's pretty much it. And it's about twice the cost of a regular shelter. So unfortunately, we're looking at a cost benefit where we'd have to provide less shelters to our transit riders to provide this. But so with saying that, I'm quite supportive of pollinators in general. So might I suggest that we have quite a bit of boulevard green space in Barrie that we could kind of enact those kind of plantings in those areas. I think these are generally for areas where it's pretty urban, where there's really not much green grass space that's underutilized like we have in Barrie.
That's a really good point, Mike. Thank you. Alice, your hand, go ahead. And then Anne-Marie.
Mike, can you, I'm not entirely clear on what the concept of bus stop pollinator gardens is. So can you maybe give us a little bit of an outline?
It's cool. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And when I first saw it, I was quite I did some initial research on it because it looked interesting and it added a nice place to the bus stop. So what they do, I think it was the Netherlands who first came up with this idea, is they put pollinator garden on top of their bus shelters. So they have a flat roof-based bus shelter, and they plant it on top of that. That's the example I've seen for this kind of configuration.
Any other questions, Al? Follow up to that? Or?
So did they, I mean, I can see that on a flat roof, but I can also see in Barrie in the wintertime, at least until climate change gets really cranked up, probably in 5 years. And, you know, we have, instead of having heavy snow loads, we'll just have ice for all the snow melting on it. What sort of roofs, like, do they have pitched roofs on the things, or because I'm kind of, I think I'm we don't know what the heck's going to happen, and in terms of dealing with those structures and stuff. And but I kind of like Mike's first suggestion about using, if we have space that we can turn into a pollinator garden or a wildflower garden sort of thing next to the bus stop. One thing from the aesthetic standpoint, now, I think it'd be great. There will no doubt be people who will think it's an ugly patch of weeds, and why the hell are we doing this and making our city look ugly? But trying to inject it into the where we're really, well, I think our downtown now, with all the other than the street trees, you know, there's not a lot of green around, and not a lot of natural planting or anything to soften that incredibly hard urban landscape. So carry on, Michael.
Thanks, Al. Anne-Marie?
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions. So one is, and thank you, Mike, for the context about, you know, what we can and can't do based on shelter, and if it's adding it with a certain type of design, it might be cost prohibitive or impact residents. As we look at different existing infrastructure, so I've noticed some that are dome-shaped roofs in certain areas, but then I'm also noticing even in Ward 3, there's the odd one that is flat, older. I didn't know if there was something we could do as a pilot or that supported current infrastructure to try one or two in an area to see if it worked as part of a bee city. I know Stephanie with the city is doing, I think, or planning to do quite a bit of education, even about how we as residents engage with bees and pollinators, because sometimes there's that that also educational piece about when we are deliberately attracting them to certain areas in which, you know, we're active in, if that's safe or not to do so. And so some great education pieces there. So would a pilot be possible in some of the areas? I'm assuming that's older infrastructure with a flat roof. Is there anything we could trial or actually have as kind of a fun interactive station that attracts residents to kind of say, hey, look what's going on here? Might not be an approach we do across the city, but maybe it could be kind of a spotlight. One, for instance, I think might be close to tall trees, which is already a bit of a spotlight around that natural space, and one that's been highlighted in Communities in Bloom in the past. So I've got other questions, but I'm hoping that might give you something to comment on.
Thanks for breaking up your questions. It's tough to answer them. So unfortunately, those flat roof shelters you speak of, those are our older ones. So they're about a decade old, if not more. So we're slowly replacing them. And it's not necessarily the roof slope or flat, it's the structural support you need to hold the dirt necessary to keep plants on these shelters. So that was what was quoted to us from the shelter supplier as the one cost prohibitive problem with these types of plantings. And so they suggested if you have green space, you know, throughout your city, it doesn't necessarily need to be at bus stops, just wherever boulevard space, you can use those spaces for these pollinator areas.
Have you seen any other models other than the rooftop? I know we've had other questions too about almost like a side container, but not boulevard. I know that might get into then issues with mowing and other pieces, but would love to know, and maybe this is something that goes back to staff to come back with more information if possible, but what might align with our Barrie as a bee city, but also around, how do we promote those boulevard gardens that are actually not necessarily someone's boulevard, but in those green spaces where there's not necessarily someone assigned to it. So again, for instance, are there different approaches where we would pick, a strip and would we apply something like a park ambassador and look at resident engagement more formally around supporting the planting of it around perennials that tie to native species, but do tie to that beautification approach that kind of once planted might have a less of a maintenance impact, but does look at beautifying areas maybe close to bus stops and where residents, are congregating around those nice spaces. So I'll leave it there, but would love to see, what the approach is other than, some of our green spaces that aren't really tied to a residential boulevard. And if there's an initiative there that we can kind of approach if we can't do what I'm hearing is bee stop gardens, but something where we can expand how we attract pollinators to Barrie.
Following up on that, Mike, is there, do you know if there's do we have a contract with a company to mow the lawns around bus stops, or is it our operations department that does it? Do you know how we deal with that right now?
That would be operations. We take care of the snow clearing, but in terms of summer maintenance, that's our operations department.
Okay, so yeah, maybe that's a conversation we need to have with operations. Is there an opportunity for us to naturalize? Like that could be a quick win, right? Like naturalizing some of the spaces around bus stops. Al?
Yeah, Keenan, I think this is an idea that has some really interesting potential. The city of Barrie and I've lived here for over 40 years now, and the city has had a fantastic, and it's been recognized with the Communities in Bloom Awards and things like that repeatedly from our horticulture people, doing amazing jobs on a lot of our on a lot of our parks and stuff with flower beds and things like that. I think there's an opportunity here to think a lot broader than just. We've got a history of doing it in city parks, and we've got lots of attaboys and attagirls for doing that sort of thing. And why just confine our thinking to the city parks or to the areas just around the bus shelters? Although I agree, I think it's a great idea. I mean, the idea of having plants sort of hanging down from the roof of the bus shelter is sort of kind of a very Mediterranean feel about it or something like that. Although I have no idea if they even do that sort of thing down there. But thinking more broadly about this. And not just thinking about city-owned lands and boulevards and stuff, but how do we promote people doing more, or enable people to do more of this sort of naturalization? I can tell you, I see it happening on my own street, and one of the things that's driving it, and this is just a residential neighborhood, is because a lot of people have repeatedly redone front lawns, and they repeatedly get white grubs or whatever, and it's like it's an expensive, frustrating, and no-win proposition. And the idea of people landscaping their front yards more, I just think that's such a win-win, because when you see it done, it's spectacular. And it just creates such a more livable space. When you get into more hard surfaced areas like downtown, that's going to be trickier, but there are things you can do. But more than just thinking about, like in the past, we've gone and implanted street trees downtown and put tree guards around them. And we finally figured out that we actually need to spend, to get a good tree to survive downtown, you have to give it the right kind of structural protection and support. And that's not cheap, but it is worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I think this will come back in with, I don't know where our urban design guidelines are going with this stuff, but for all the new development that's going to take place, there's an area that really needs to, I think, more than encourage. I think we need to say, hey, we're setting the bar, and is the bar going to be a little higher? Yeah, because you know what, you're getting, all these projects are getting all kinds of setback reductions and getting, increased density and everything else. And, whether I like that or not doesn't matter. But what's the public get out of it? And I think we could get a much more beautiful city. I don't think people should be allowed to put large parking lots out without having, all kinds of landscaping that has to be properly maintained in those, because it's in so many ways, it's such an asset to, to our community. So anyway, off the soapbox for now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will remind the committee too that we passed that motion recently. I think it was our May meeting. Yeah, our May meeting, to direct the operations department to look at. We were asking about strategies to phase out gas-powered maintenance equipment, but one of the things we wanted them to look at was park naturalization as part of that strategy. And we had talked with them about an education piece so that the public understands what's going on. See the grass not being cut, and it might look like a patch of weeds, but it's actually a really important pollinator area. So I see an opportunity there with that investigation that's ongoing by the operations department to further these conversations about naturalization across the city. I think parks and boulevards that are cut by operations are probably the low-hanging fruit, and I think it's a way to lead by example too for the city to show residents that you can do this, and it's actually cheaper and easier and can be beautiful too. Any other thoughts, Anne-Marie? Yeah.
So a couple of comments, and I'll leave it here because maybe it's more for staff to take away, because I'm thinking maybe it's more of a comment for Mona or also for Andy or Eric with Living Green, but a couple of things come to mind. I think we also talked about a private tree bylaw around how do we also look at appreciation of that type of asset across our city, especially when properties change and we're seeing some backyard developments. I think that's coming to city building, but I wanted to check in about where that was at. So that will be an important one. But the other one might be asking Andy, who's now, I think, got a formal representation on this committee with Living Green. I recall separate conversations around, quality of tree and age of tree, especially around new development, and issues around how compacted that land becomes due to the construction process. That does have some type of correlation to likelihood of that tree surviving. And so maybe there's something that we can consider or see if Andy can share, if it is knowledge that she has, that we might want to make a recommendation or a consideration to identify, making sure that when we go through this new development, which will be, extensive, there's some guidelines around preparation for that tree to make sure that they've got a better chance of viability. And then lastly, I was wondering about, and this might be, Mike, let me know if this is a question for you or not. So what I'm noticing, I'm not sure if others are, is as we hit spring, and of course we're seeing some turnover in property here, but I'm also seeing a lot of boulevards that are not being cut. And I'm assuming, can you confirm for me, Mike, if you have this information on hand, that the boulevard grass cutting is the responsibility of the resident in the property behind it? And so what happens when we have absentee landlords? And is there also a place for a conversation about how do we engage in boulevard adoption or areas of interest when maybe they're not being maintained, or when we see property standard issues. So are boulevards the responsibility of homeowners?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would know that being from Barrie Transit, but that's my
Because we
understanding.
don't service it, right?
Yeah.
Operations. Yeah, so that just comes to mind about how do we engage homeowners, and I'm not sure, Wendy, if you're aware of that.
Wendy? Is your hand?
Hi, thank you. Yes, boulevards are currently not regulated under bylaw to require homeowners to maintain them. People do so as a courtesy to the city.
In follow-up, Wendy, is there any, would you have any recommendations, or would this be something from staff about, do we look at boulevards that, so then how does that get managed from a bylaw if it's not maintained? Does that just become an operations that kind of, when they see it, they mow it? Okay, all right. So the only thing about the Boulevard Gardens is it gets formally registered for free and at least identifies to operations that is now a no-mow area, that is being maintained by the property. Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Yeah, it'd be great to look at, how, if staff have any recommendations around boulevards, and if there's anything even to partner with horticulture. So we've got Barrie Urban Gardeners that are a 2,000 member or more group, and Barrie Families Unite. And maybe if there's a strategy around doing a takeover of some of this space, but it becomes a bit more of an issue around number of hands, number of bodies to help do a planting and prep, maybe we could be engaging residents who might volunteer to help that, if plants might be able to be supplied through the property or through donation, if not through the city.
Kelly, I saw your hand.
And I think too, we could tie it back to our certification as a B city. So, if we put this in the big plan that says, we are a certified B city, thereby this is what we do. We convert, 10 boulevards per ward. We plant pollinators down in front of, I'm going to be very specific, instead of petunias. We plant a beautiful pollinator garden in front of the washrooms at Centennial Beach, to promote, because there's a lot of people that come to Centennial Beach locally and also from out of town. So let's do a takeover of that as a conversion, again, under the umbrella that we realize that our B city is our certification, and we need to maintain that. And that's part of it, is incorporating these pollinator gardens and using our great staff that have the greenhouse and can grow these things to create these beds.
And I don't know if, Wendy, you can speak to this a little bit. Like, does the city have currently sort of a strategy to further that naturalization in our parks? Like, when we're talking about plantings in the spring, like, do we ever consider naturalizing a certain garden or area in a park rather than doing just flower plantings, or is that something to look at or think about?
So there are two pieces to that approach currently. We have the Parks Planning Department that works on the policy piece of it, and then we have the Operations Department that does the actual work. A good 15 years ago, we launched the first naturalization policy, and we did an analysis of all our parks and mapped where the areas in those parklands would be candidates for no-mow zones. And then we had some basic level signs that we would put in to say this is a naturalization area. So that's been a long time ago, and I think there's a lot of interest in circling around, looking at that again, updating, reviewing. As you can imagine, there's a lot of parkland in the city of Barrie, so there's a lot of opportunity to look at things, but there's a lot to analyze. So I wouldn't want to speak right now where Kevin Rankin is on that process, but I know Parks Planning is very interested in supporting that and whatever role we can do it. So it's not a new idea, but it's something that is very timely now, and that we have B City as a nice tie-in. Not sure if that answered the question specifically.
Yeah, that helps for sure.
Okay.
It's good to know it's been mapped out and looked at that way. I didn't realize that was actually the process that had happened. So I'm hearing a couple things. So it sounds like we're kind of interested in looking at more naturalization on boulevards, particularly around bus stops, because those are regularly maintained by the operations department. And I think there's an opportunity for us as part of the investigation that is ongoing because of our motion looking at phasing out gas-powered maintenance equipment. There's an opportunity for us to further that goal of naturalization through that.
Keenan, to Wendy's
Yes,
comment, is there anything that is worth circulating in that past report, or any low-hanging fruit without going back that could give us a sense of where there could be opportunity before that gets refreshed, or an ask for Kevin to come back to a future meeting to comment on maybe staff's vision or considerations, just in case there's something that we could be kind of future, forward looking at next spring about, and putting some plans underway if appropriate.
Yeah, so you're thinking like a report back from Kevin on sort of the progress with that naturalization policy and the analysis that they did?
Yeah, or even just a verbal update if it streamlines time on task around where that, is that something that's being looked at by staff this year? Is it in their work plan? Or is there anything that, it would be good for us to be aware of that was in the last plan that's still relevant? And maybe we can zone in on an area or two and then see if we can get some support for it.
Sure. Yeah, love that idea. Okay, so we can have that conversation. We can have Kevin at our next meeting to provide that update around naturalization on city-owned property. Eric, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just have an unfortunate vision of pollinator gardens, naturalized areas set up near bus stops or other places like that. And instead of the 3-inch grass, you've got 18-inch or more plants, which is wonderful. But then I worry about it filling up with cigarette butts and litter, and people seeing it as sort of a no man's land where it's easier to drop things. So I think part of it would be signage, identifying each one, and we could have like a little wee sign, a standard one for small areas, and then a bigger one if we have one at Centennial Park for a big demonstration. But also to have some kind of make sure there's a litter receptacle that's more convenient to the bus stop than the naturalized area, and just try and proactively guide people not to do that, because if it does fill up with litter, then it creates sort of an opposite message that would feed into the this is ugly and unlooked after kind of thing, and be counterproductive. So I wonder if we could just put that in as a guideline to always look at litter issues and how to proactively reduce that, so it doesn't something we have to react to afterwards.
Yeah, very good point. I mean, I already do get a lot of complaints about litter around bus stops, so it's an ongoing issue. Wilf, I see your hand is up. And
yeah, thanks, Keenan. And it's just, I have two topics that I wonder if you, they're unrelated to what we're talking about right now, but they're time sensitive. We could just leave a few moments in the agenda to introduce a couple of funding opportunities that the city might have around green transportation.
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about that. You have to kind of squeeze it into an agenda item. So I think when we're talking about the active transportation webinar that I think Kelly's going to speak to a little bit, talk about it then. It's related to active.
It'll fit in well with that, I think, and it's a very time sensitive application and significant funding that might be available. So
okay,
if we can fit it in today, because the next meeting will be too late.
Okay, good to know. Okay, with that in mind, we do have other things on the agenda. Are we clear? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Al.
Oh, just Mike, with the bus shelters now, is smoking allowed or prohibited within the bus shelter?
It is not allowed.
It is not allowed. So we got a problem because somebody who's riding the bus, can't smoke on the bus. They can't smoke in the shelter where they're waiting. So there is a bus shelter then a bigger magnet for cigarette butts, just to be dropped around it. Like, is that, because I share Eric's concern. I mean, it doesn't take much to trash any kind of a landscape and make it unattractive and offensive as opposed to attractive and welcoming. So that's clearly something that, and it's just not just butts, but they're my prime aggravation.
Yeah, and I know I was asking some questions to staff recently about garbage around shelters, and the public space bin program is going to be rolled out soon. They were waiting on some legislative changes from the province that they were looking at standardizing some of the public space bins across the province, so it kind of delayed some of that work. So I think that's an important consideration, just having those bins available near those stops to prevent that.
Yeah, and another thing would be maybe instead of locating them directly adjacent to the bus pad and bus shelter, it's a little bit of ways, talking a few meters. Just because when we find, riders waiting for their buses, sometimes they just kind of pace a bit, for lack of a better word. I do it too.
Yeah.
So putting it out of the active travel areas may be beneficial for these plantings.
Okay, anything else on this issue? Are we clear on next steps that we're going to have that conversation with Kevin at the next meeting? Sort of an update on that process around naturalization. Anything else?
I think so. That kind of set on the city parks, right, around green spaces. The other piece, I think, back to Kelly's comment, is any staff thoughts or considerations about where an engagement might fit. So I think about your comment about the 10 wards, right? At 10 by 10, right? And so how, is there an approach where we can look at resident engagement next spring or even before next spring, but have a road in each ward where residents have adopted their boulevards and we've got themes. And so it supports kind of bike tours and visiting, but also an appreciation of maybe different types of pollinators that we want to attract or feature, and a spotlight across the city as a bit of a kind of a 360 around, where Boulevard Gardens are displayed as an approach for others to kind of look at, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I get
that might be Mona.
Yeah. For
If
sure.
it ties into Communities in Bloom. Yeah.
Yeah, and so maybe as part of that conversation at our, I guess it'll be our September meeting, we can talk about that, because operations would still need to be, I guess, aware and involved if we're talking about boulevards. They're the ones that look at boulevards. So maybe we can have that sort of holistic view of naturalization with a view to resident engagement in the spring around boulevards. Does that work? Invite Mona to that meeting. Randy, if you want to make note of that. We're looking to have that conversation with Mona and Kevin. Okay. Does that work, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I just don't want to miss that, but maybe it's a good opportunity for residents to step up. I'm still seeing most are not aware that it's free to register a Boulevard Garden, and just understanding the responsibility they have versus the city for it. Starting to see more of them popping up. That might be nice around if there's momentum, if we can help to push that forward and look at maybe different features that could support Communities in Bloom as well next year.
Are you on the Communities in Bloom committee? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Are you meeting at all over the summer? Or, yeah.
We had regular meetings. I think the last one was canceled just because it's in motion. So everyone's, kind of pushing out the register your gardens and use the theme yellow for hope by, I believe, July 23rd. I'll have to check that, but it is this month. We are looking for people to register. And then again, the judging competition will be virtual. So photos and little bloomers, we're asking for that to come in. So please spread the word, watch for that. And we're trying to make sure that we still can put a spotlight on all the beautiful spaces that residents have been involved in.
I wonder if there's an opportunity to actually have almost an award category around Boulevard Gardens, as a way of.
That's my question.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it is, but there's different theme areas. So whether they're a boulevard or not, I think you can register them. But there are different themes, I think, that tie to pollinators, that tie to the theme, that also look at different features. So one year, for instance, I put in a pond, and that was kind of a new feature that I showcased. So I think there's a range of areas, and in particular wanting to see definitely pollinators, natural spaces popping up and using native species, but also engagement with businesses and with children.
Yeah, yeah. I think actually highlighting Boulevard specifically could be a way of just getting people thinking, right? For maybe next year, obviously this year's underway, but I do want to move on from this topic soon, but Al, I see your hand. So.
Well, just a quick question. Does Communities in Bloom, I thought the award process through that program was basically for the municipality based on all the stuff they were doing. I know the Barry's Garden Club, when it was the Horticultural Society, for years gave out awards to different gardens and stuff like that. And that kind of program has been done in a lot of other communities for over a long period of time. So I don't know whether Wendy might have an idea on, like, is there an award or recognition program that that actually operates in the city now?
I'm not aware of one other than the Communities in Bloom that you can identify towards, but I know there's other individuals who've taken upon themselves, like, to do the Monarch way stations, and they're displaying those signs in their lawns when they've got the formal designation. So other than that, I'm not aware of anything separate and apart, but I'm not sure, Brandy, if I've got a chat feature here. I do. So I'll put in the, if everyone can see that, I'll put in the Q&A. At least the CIB, the Communities in Bloom details, because there's different pieces that we compete on nationally, but we compete against ourselves. So Barry is ranked based on what we've done the previous years, and we get different, like I think we received a particular recognition award for tall trees in 2019 and another area. So new things pop up, but there's definitely about 7 or 8 I'm looking at here. There's a school garden, public garden, children's garden, and residential gardens, and it's open to all individuals across Canada. So I think it's just where at a municipal level, of course, we're engaging, but I'll send the national link there that is echoed on our City of Barrie website, if that's helpful.
Okay. Anything else on this topic for now? Any other considerations in advance for our next meeting? For that conversation with Mona and Kevin? No? Okay. All right, so let's move on if everyone's okay with that. So the next item is the City of Guelph's landscape program. I know Kelly was having a conversation with someone there, and they presented with the Barrie Urban Gardeners group. So I don't know. Oh, they didn't?
Not.
They were supposed
Friday.
to. Oh, it's this Friday.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Friday. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you want to just explain it?
Anne-Marie, have you been chatting? I have been chatting. I'll let Anne-Marie speak.
Sure. So Karen McEwen, if I'm saying her name correctly, hopefully I am. She's the outside water use program coordinator with environmental services with the City of Guelph. So she's going to be giving a presentation. So I guess for context, Bugs, Barrie Urban Gardeners, there's about a group of 9 of us that get together, wear different hats, just look at cross-pollination of ideas, let's say synergies, opportunities, so be it Living Green to Urban Pantry to different interests. We've brought her forward to kind of share some information. So this is really just around where we create and share ideas around a resident level and engagement level around how we can bring things forward. So she is presenting to that small group of 9 of us this Friday morning from 8:30 to about 9:15 a.m. I'm happy to open that up to any members of this committee. If you're interested, by all means, just send me an email and I'll add you to that list, kind of an open forum. But I do want to thank Caro and Kelly for bringing this type of information and interest forward. We can share back what was provided if that's of interest. We do have members of city staff who've been invited to join in to listen to Karen. I'm not sure yet if we've got permission to record it, but I do have that capability. So it might be something that we can share if it is consented to after the fact. But really, looking to see her approaches around some leading practice considerations that she's doing at City of Guelph, to have a bit of an open Q&A, and then to bring some other pieces forward.
That's great.
Yeah, so what
Kelly?
she's bringing to the table, and what the City of Guelph has done, has created this this program where she facilitates helping people with their gardens and greening, making their living space greener, and giving advice. So the City of Guelph offers this for free, and it's a free service. So this is what kind of piqued my interest when I read about this. I thought, oh, well, that's an interesting thing. So originally we wanted her to come to this meeting, but unfortunately the timing didn't work. So we've got her into bugs, and so we'll, as Anne-Marie says, we'll summarize that, and or you can come and feed that back. But it sounds like an amazing program, and it's free, and it's really helpful for the residents of Guelph.
Amazing. It sounds like a great thing to inform our conversation in September with Mona and Kevin too, and bring some of those opportunities to that conversation. Thank you so much for that. Any questions on that, committee members? All right, perfect. Okay, so review of CIP planning, active transportation webinar. So Kelly, this was your item, so if you want to
Thank you.
introduce that.
Thank you. Would I be able to, can I just share, would you guys just indulge me, and I'm not going to bore you with the PowerPoint, but I just thought it would just summarize it a little better. Let me do that first.
Great.
And then I can.
You've got the right permissions there. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
And
Awesome.
while that's happening, Keenan, did we skip an agenda item, or has that been deferred?
Did we? Oh, yeah. That was an accident.
We can cap it on later. I just didn't know if it was
Okay.
taken off.
Yeah, no, that was totally my bad. I just saw pollinator garden. It's like, oh, we talked about that. No,
Okay.
I did not. Sorry about that.
I'll be quick. So on May 21st, I signed up for this active transportation webinar through CIP, which is the planning organization. I can send you the link if anybody's interested. It's about an hour long, but it's really informative, and it's just really well done. It's a lot of good information. So I just wanted to summarize just a few of the key points. So it was facilitated by Andy Fillmore, who's from Halifax, our MPP, and basically I think he's on this junket to speak about the $400 million over 5 years that is being dedicated, and specifically for a national strategy on active transportation. It's, you know, they're into it. I mean, they've got this money, and apparently it's coming this summer. There wasn't an actual deadline around it, but he kept speaking to July. So I'm hoping that that's when it is. So capital and other funding and for educational and outreach as well. So I think initially it was capital funding, but they've also thought about providing that monies as well for education. He's from Nova Scotia. He has a couple of cool points. I mean, Nova Scotia, the province, has a rebate program on their e-bikes, which are the electric assist bikes. I think it's around $1,000 or something. It's quite good, and it's supported by, you know, a couple of national organizations. Is something that perhaps you know, we could potentially look into, and also Natural Resources Canada. So it's a lot of uptake on that. Hence why we can't buy electric bikes. They're really, really hard to get right now. Everybody's taking those up. So, so it was great. So now we know this funding is available, it's ready, and we need to act on it, right? So we need to, whenever those applications come out, we need to be pretty specific about, you know, what kind of funding we want. And, you know, I think we're on track maybe to move a little quicker, you know, with our cycle lanes. So this is their basic strategy, and it's quite a big one. You know, it's a national transportation strategy, so it's really good and really engaging for all of the provinces. And you know, it's a really great opportunity for us to take advantage of this. You know, as we grow our cycling and walking and active transportation portfolio here in Barrie. This great Army DeFrankia, she's from the town of Ajax, and She's an active transportation coordinator there, full-time, full on. She just finished her planning degree. Anyway, this woman, she's amazing. She's the second Canadian, the first Filipino Canadian, and first racialized Canadian to receive the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals Public Sector Employee of the Year award in 2020. And she did that through an incredible amount of work that she did in the small town of Ajax. Now, she is so good at inclusive engagement and public engagement, and really looking at the key to success in getting people to adopt active transportation is engagement and education. And part of her role was she did an amazing job with her team and getting the mayors and councillors taking the lead, on cycling and walking. And her whole hashtag Get Ajax Moving was very successful. One of her key points was talking about better collaboration within the city departments when it comes to active transportation. So making sure we're partnering correctly and, having a roundtable with whether it's economic development and partnering with the BIA and the farmers market, and also externally with the strategic partners to, again, look at the whole education piece. Now, tourism vary, and I didn't know this, and it was too bad that, through Bike Month that we didn't get this out through active transportation through the city. So I'm not sure if we need to collaborate a little better with them, but they have created a few bike tours, and I kind of put my camera on their little sign downtown that they had. And, there's this heritage bike tour, and, which was really cool. So I didn't know that. And perhaps we just need to be better at connecting with our partners within the city and outside the city, so we can all work together. I highlighted the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. I'm not sure if any of us are members of that, but our committee can be a member. It's only $80 a year, and the amount of webinars and information and up-to-date data is quite incredible, and they're very supportive if you're trying to move quickly with integrating active transportation in your city. So I would suggest that, we become a member, or maybe the city already is, but I think it would be important for the committee, as a whole, so we could have access to it. And they do have committee memberships as well. So I think that's a really cool thing. One of the important pieces, and it kind of came out time and time again, was the criticalness of having a dedicated active transportation coordinator, full-time piece. And we really need to push that forward. I think that's really important. Anyway, Army she's willing to come and speak at our meeting as well, just to give some key highlights and tips and techniques that she's learned with the town of Ajax. She's really moved things forward from an active transportation and engagement perspective. So that's an opportunity for us. So she created this whole piece about Get Moving Ajax, and little challenges, and just a lot of really great information, and their actual biking paths, looking at the environment. So she's really kind of come full circle with that, which I think she did a marvelous job with it. She's just so dynamic. So Chris Bruntlett, lucky man, he's in the Netherlands, and he's with the Dutch Cycling Embassy. Now, I don't know, 60 to 74% of people use active transportation, right? We know this. It's so lovely and wonderful. And what a goal, right? That would be to have. And again, just pulling out key points, their schools play a really key role in supporting and educating the kids. All the kids have to take a cycling test, in order for them to pass and get engaged. So they're very engaged that way. He really said you really need to complete a minimum grid of paths to get people going. And by doing that, what you try to do is connect all the dots for people. So creating these short pathways, whether it's going from Cundall's to the farmer's market, going from, the other side of town on the south end to the library, restaurants and cafes. His key, he found, in getting people more engaged was catching the short trips. It really converts people to bicycle. So again, it's the whole education and engagement piece as well. Electric cycling, which is the electric assist bicycles, is big, and it's a great range extender. you know, that really shows to commuting more, you know, as opposed to pleasure. So engaging at that level as well. Secure biking is very important, and seamlessly integrating it to public transit, you know, as we do have carriers on our buses now, but also having that secure, more secure bike parking for people who are taking the transit. Again, there's a couple of links here I can certainly send to you if you have any interest in best practices. The other speaker was Dr. Ahmad Ghanidi. He's with urban planning at McGill. He's incredible, lots of great information. But again, the key point here is engagement and education in tandem with growing lanes quickly, right? So you've got these two working together. If we're not educating and engaging our folks to do it, then they're not going to have a lot of information around it. Really articulating the desire to the council. He said there's a lot of misinformation, so we need to tackle that about bike lanes, how they remove parking and lost business, and where his students have done research and it's just not the case. It's actually the opposite. He talked about MOGO in Detroit, which is a shared and multimodal rentals, which means, you know, people in wheelchairs. We have got tons of different types of rentals and multimodal ways of transporting people. And in Detroit, it's very, very successful. Winter, right? We live in this great country, especially in Barrie. But he said it's not that difficult to start to remove and build into your budget trail maps and maintenance on being able to extend our cycling throughout the winter. There is a Winter Cycling Federation who have actually created a winter pilot program. So perhaps that's something, you know, we could do to get those engaged folks. He was really clear about lines, you know, painted lines. You need to test it with the painted lines and creating these separations. But as he indicated, paint is not infrastructure. So we need to really think about how that works. So he was really terrific too. So I'm just throwing things out here. I think we need some short-term action. Using some federal money, perhaps we'll have some more money he's going to talk about with this programming of active transportation specifically. I really feel we need to move up the development of the Coulter Street cycling pedestrian bridge. I think we need it quicker than indicated, and I'd like to think about how we can do that. We need that safe passage over the 400 from the Northeast in particular. Is that St. Vincent, and what do we do with that? Maybe we've got some money from the feds that can help us figure that out, right? I highly, highly think and recommend that we need to hire, and we need to make that motion about hiring a full-time active transportation coordinator to begin this education and engagement. And that's all. Thank you.
That's great, Kelly. And I see that Brett has joined, which is great timing for this conversation. Some great recommendations there too. I did want to start off by asking Brett a few questions. I know some things, he sent me a great email with some details about the Cycleberry infrastructure program, which could be helpful for us in this conversation. So one of the components of the program is the development of an education and outreach program, which, as you noted, is really important. When are we anticipating that staff report on the program, Brett? Those recommendations?
2022. So hopefully, before, am I muted?
No, sorry, you cut off just at the beginning. 2022.
Yeah, just hopefully June timeframe next year is what we're targeting.
Okay. Okay, and will that come to this committee before it goes to council?
The staff, that's a great question. We can definitely look at that and see how that works timing wise, but it's a bit challenging just hitting the committee, then hitting council with the work to be done, but we can definitely look into that. And I would say that staff report will also include any recommendations for additional staff to undertake some of the education and outreach as well. But it's always an option of the committee to make a recommendation to building committee if they feel that they want to move faster with that. So
I understand the timing issues, but I think it's really important that this committee gets a good look at the staff report on the Cycleberry program. Like, that's our bread and butter. And I think we need a good opportunity to dig into that and make recommendations based on the staff report to City Council. So I think, if possible, we would like to see that as soon as there's I guess a draft available for us, so that we can make comments. Was there a plan to engage with this committee further before the staff report? Like,
absolutely. So what we're looking at is a PIC this fall, and we'll hopefully be able to give you kind of a private sneak peek before we do that with the public. And we'll just look to schedule that in likely September or October. And then there'll also be a spring follow-up PIC as well. So that gets a bit compressed with the June timeline with council. So that'd be either very late winter, very early spring for a follow-up PIC. So there'll definitely be involvement with this committee, and we'll look at establishing a potential 1 or 2 meetings with that as well. So definitely have an opportunity to provide input on this, but generally we are following recommendations laid out in the transportation master plan. So just to temper kind of expectations, we're implementing kind of this is our phase 1 implementation, and then we'll be going back in to do a TMP update in recognition of the 2051 planning horizons. And that's where we kind of open the books up again for kind of a broad review of recommendations in the TMP and where we'd like to go. So just to give you some context of the 2 different projects that are underway and will be underway shortly. So,
are there any questions from members of the committee on that process and how we can sort of get involved in that? Alan? Sorry.
Yep, thanks, Keenan. Brett, could you just, I'm a little confused here because at first I thought you were talking about the transportation master plan, which I understood was maybe going to start getting reviewed sometime next year. So what is that? What's the specific initiative that you're focusing on for a PIC this fall?
So what we're doing right now, the Cycleberry infrastructure program, is taking
the Cycleberry
infrastructure program.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So what we're doing is taking the recommendations from the TMP and packaging all the quick wins. So where appropriate, through the Book 18 active transportation facility guideline, that's a province-wide standards document, we're looking to implement all the quick wins within the city. So these are our low volume, low stress routes where they're suitable for on-road cycling, urban shoulders, and road diets where we add paint to do bike lanes. So we're following best practices for these routes. And what we're looking to do with this effort is to build out as large as network as we can and as connected network as we can without having to undertake large capital projects as our first step. And then the follow-on step would be looking at individual network gaps. So these are short sections between the projects we identified in phase 1, where we may need to undertake small to medium capital projects. So an example would be on Cundles between Coulter and Kozlov, there's a gap. The solution to that gap might be a 3-meter multi-use path on the north side. So that would provide connectivity between a planned cycle route likely to the north because of the narrowness of Kozlov at that location. I just have to double check. But on Coulter, we're looking at retrofitting bike lanes because we have the road platform. So it's just making that connection so there's not a gap between those locations. So that's an example. And then the final phase of the Cycleberry infrastructure program is looking at Bayfield, Essa, and Young and putting forward a recommendation for a large corridor retrofit that we would be looking at further design work to implement. So for example, if it was Young Street, they do a functional design. We take that, see if there's any environmental assessment requirements, and either proceed to an environmental assessment or move to detailed design if we can, and budget that accordingly through the capital planning process.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like our community will have an opportunity to engage in that process around the time of the PIC this fall and in advance of the staff report coming to council in 2022. So I think that's our opportunity to really dig in and make any recommendations that we feel need to be made around, a dedicated AT coordinator, any projects we think council needs to consider accelerating. Kelly, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that process going forward, or if we're happy with that that direction for the committee in terms of.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to get engagement at this committee for this program. Brett, I have a question. I went through the 2018 or 2019 active transportation plan, which was worked on and was great. I noticed in there was now, I guess it's a two-part question. Part one, was that planning document or approved by council, and was it adopted?
Yes, it was approved and adopted by council.
Okay. So there was a recommendation in there for $50,000 a year for education and engagement pieces. Where is that, or how did that work out?
So that would be what we're looking at right now through Cycleberry. So taking that recommendation and developing what that actually is in terms of scope, so that we have a better idea of resourcing, what the deliverables will be of that, and then we can present that to council, but that's where that is.
Okay, so, all right. Okay, yeah, no, I think that's great if we have engagement, at the table with this Cycleberry infrastructure. And I just think it's important that, I think it's important that we be a little bolder, honestly, and move a little quicker. And whatever that means for you, I don't know, Brett. I know it's a big thing, but I think it's important to meet our net zero greener berry. So I think it's great that we're getting engaged.
Yeah, and just a quick thought on that. I completely agree, Kelly, and I think staff are in a bit of a tough position trying to sell this to council. Like some of these are big infrastructure projects. If we want to accelerate them, that means capital funding that might not be there. So I think we can offer as a committee to kind of be the bad cop, like with council, like to kind of push council a little bit further. So like, I think, Brett, like we want to have your back, and we understand that certain recommendations need to be made just in terms of the scope of what council, the direction that council has given, different funding constraints, but we want to be there to push the city further and help you do that in any way possible.
Absolutely, and that's really excellent, and appreciate that support. I think it's important for committee to understand just the progress that has been made, and I know there's desire to move even faster, so definitely appreciate that. One of the key elements, though, is moving in an evidence-based framework, very methodical approach to how we do this. So that is one of the challenges. It's not a huge challenge, but we just want to make sure that the infrastructure we're building, because once we move away from kind of the low-cost infrastructure as part of Cycleberry into these large retrofits, and again, this is just ballparking figures, like easily we could be $1 to $3 million per kilometer. So we have to be strategic where the needs are the greatest because we are in a financially constrained situation. We've been fortunate to have a very supportive council, but we have to make sure we come back with very high quality recommendations where we can use this infrastructure and gain the most utility from it.
Right. On the funding piece quickly, because I know Kelly talked about it, the $400 million national strategy, I think it's over like 8 years or 5 years, maybe you said, Kelly. Is that funding that we are looking at and accessing?
Yeah, we review all opportunities. I don't believe that has a window that is opened. We have applied for the Canadian Healthy Initiatives. Initially, we did for Cycleberry, we're unsuccessful. I believe other city applications were successful, at least one, but we did reapply for the second round, so we'll see if anything changes. But we always keep an opportunity for grants, and if you folks find anything, please let us know. But we do have our team in corporate asset management that do keep their ears to the ground for those types of opportunities. So appreciate any kind of further information too, because there's lots of different opportunities out there.
Okay. Anne-Marie?
Thanks for that, Brett. Is there ever any feedback that we get through those grant applications when we're unsuccessful about how we could have been more competitive, and if there's anything to glean from that back to this committee about anything staff would need support with around, whether it's, I'm thinking back to, the last 2 commentaries that we got on pedestrian friendly city, bike friendly city, and those applications. So where we can kind of start to look at how we support any future applications that might be more successful. Is there anything that you would ever see of benefit to this committee to be aware of about where we need to make progress to be more competitive?
I did ask for a debrief, but they did not provide a debrief. My understanding is that they had a very high volume of applications. And again, this is my personal speculation, but I do speculate that whether it's allotted based on population size, that they kind of identify a portion for potential municipalities. Again, that is just a guess. The other element too was they were looking to see if the project will it proceed? Does it have existing funding? So this project had funding. So I do wonder if that maybe put us into kind of a lesser pool for an opportunity. But those are my 2 kind of guesses to that on Cycleberry, because otherwise I would say it was a fairly robust application. But those 2 elements plus the ask was the maximum amount, which I believe was 250,000. So
thanks, Brett.
No problem.
One other question I had based on what Kelly presented about the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. Is that an association you looked into, Brad, or are involved in at all?
Yes, I'm a member of that.
Okay, that's great. Anne-Marie, did you have a question on that?
Well, on that, is that something from an access portal, Brett, with you being a member, do you have kind of line of sight to say whether or not it'd be worth the $80 for this committee to get registered so we would have access as members to those resources?
That's a great question. I think if it was just $80 for the committee, I think that's a fairly small fee. I think it would be worth it just to explore for yourselves. I haven't spent a lot of time on the platform, but it seems like it's more technically oriented questions regarding how to handle this specific AT challenge, and whether it's an intersection or a connection between different types of AT infrastructure. So I need to spend a little bit more time getting a little bit more deeper into the community, but it seemed to be more of a technical resource and probably a bit of a resource for potentially for outreach, but most of the posts I see are more technical in nature. So I'd leave that with you folks. I think it's fairly affordable, even if you wanted to try it for a year and reevaluate if it's worthwhile. That's a small fee to pay.
Could I
go ahead?
Could I table a motion that I'm not sure who, if it touches finances, all up to Wendy too, and jump in, Wendy, if you have something that would change the direction of this, but I'm looking to table a motion that would permit us to have access as a committee to paying that member fee. I'm not sure, Wendy, if you
did you have a thought on it? Sorry.
Yeah, I would just comment that during the time that we had the Active Transportation Working Group, we were a member of this organization. We paid the annual fee, and we enjoyed many good seminars as a result. And if Brett is already a member, then he could likely sign up for the webinars and share the link for this committee. I mean, $80 is not that much, but it's already accessible to you then through his membership, and there's some alignment that there could be an opportunity to just extend it. We used to they send us the link every month for the webinars, and then we'd send it out in circulation to the members of the committee. It was really well done.
So could I redirect, unless it's out of scope, that it's a request to staff to provide links to resources tied to that membership, and if not possible, to identify if we need to make a separate purchase for committee access.
All right. Do we need a formal request for that, Brett, do you think, or is that something you can look at forwarding to us?
Yeah, I can look into that. That's not an issue. I just want to make sure I'm sure it's a fledgling organization that's just growing. So I want to make sure we're not breaking any rules with them. But I can definitely report back on that if that's, I do not need a motion to report back on that.
Okay, and Anne-Marie, did you want to have a motion sort of as backup?
Yeah, let's
okay.
do that too. And then if it's not needed, we don't incur the expense, but if it is, then maybe we can proceed. And then I would almost want to comment, maybe two motions that, annual. So I'll just say that the city purchases access to membership for the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee. So that would be one. And then I'd love to actually consider this on an annual. So while this committee is still a functioning structure of the city, I think if it's a valuable resource that it's an annual, it's renewed annually. So we have ongoing access to any member on this committee. So that's a comment, but the first, I'm not sure, Keen, if you got that, but that's the maybe action now to purchase it, so we have immediate access to the resources.
Yeah. That staff purchase
Committee membership.
Committee. An annual committee membership.
I would say so. Looks like historically, considering Wendy's comments about the value, and it is nominal, considering access for open membership at a committee level. And it looks like historically that this has been something that the city had purchased for the past couple of years.
Okay, so
there is precedent for it.
Staff purchase an annual committee membership for the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals for the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee.
And do we need to name the membership? I'm not sure, Kelly, if I've got that on hand accurately, but although we know what we're talking about, but if it needs to move forward for approval, if you want to be specific in that motion.
Yeah, it sounds like from what Kelly said, they have committee membership, like a membership class, right?
Committee, yeah.
Okay.
Or group.
Brett?
So it's an advocate membership,
Thank
and
you.
that's for staff or volunteers of an advocacy organization or advisory committee, and that is $88 a year.
Okay, so that staff purchase an annual advocate membership for the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals for the ATS Advisory Committee.
Thanks for that, Brett.
Okay, so moving that, any other discussion on that piece? No? Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Okay, Eric? Doesn't abstain. Any against? No? Okay, that carries. All right. That's great. Anything else on this piece around the
Hope
webinar?
my unmute button wouldn't work. Sorry.
That's all right. Thanks, Eric. I need to be supportive. So, anything else on this piece? Oh, I guess Wilf has two items. So, Wilf, if you want to take it away, we can talk about that.
Great. Thank you, Keenan. And I wonder if you can just grant me screen share. I'll have one quick screen to pop up. Actually, 2.5 items. I'll start with the half, which is really just an announcement that I wonder if this committee has a mechanism to bring that announcement forward at council to make council aware of the Canada's commitment to phasing out gas vehicles by 2035. It will be illegal to sell a gas or diesel vehicle in this country after 2035, and the role that we play on this committee for active transportation and sustainability, I think has just become increasingly important. So I wonder if there is a mechanism to just make that announcement at a council meeting so that council and staff are all aware that the ante has just been upped somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, an easy way to do that, I can make an announcement during the announcement section of General Committee or Council. The next meeting we have is August 9th. If that works for you, Wilf, do you think Pretty good. Just
Yeah,
draw
I'm just going to
council's
bring it
attention
forward
to
to
that.
the committee. I'm not sure what the committee or what you'd like is the best mechanism, but I think it is it's an important position that brings us in closer alignment with Great Britain and Israel and countries and manufacturers around the globe that are phasing out and outlawing the sale of internal combustion vehicles either 2030 or 2035.
Okay. Yeah, I think the best way to get council's attention is during that announcement section. So I'll suggest that, and if everyone's okay with that, then we'll proceed with that. Not seeing any issues. Okay. The other thing you had, Wolf?
Yeah. So the other really exciting piece is I come bearing announcements of money that we can use possibly for Kelly's initiative, but I think more broadly. And the timeline is really tight on this, and I apologize for interjecting this into the agenda at the last minute. The announcement was made last week, and we only reviewed the details of the program closely last night. The federal government, through Natural Resources Canada, has announced a zero emission vehicle awareness initiative. And I'll just quickly share that screen. So are you all seeing the screen? Is that up? That's up. Yeah. So the timeline is very tight. It was just announced about a week ago, and it's an education funding initiative, which I think would probably map across to electric bicycles and other EV initiatives that we might look to educate Barrie citizens about. And the call for proposals is only about 5 weeks from now. But a couple of amazing wins that we had in working with NRCan that I think led to this program are that they very rarely will fund more than 50%. In this case, they will fund 75%, up to $300,000 for municipalities, and you can stack that funding. So you can look to other funding sources for the municipalities' contribution. But the other piece that is just, I've never seen this in an NRCan program, is they'll allow in-kind contribution for funding. So if we have volunteer work, if we have other initiatives that we can assign a dollar value to, we can use it to contribute to the up to $300,000 that we apply for from the government. So timing's exceptionally tight, but it's a great opportunity. We're already talking about raising awareness on initiatives in Barrie that look at zero or low emission transportation, and I wonder if there's a way we can weave this into what Barrie is doing. And of course, it means staff would pretty well have to stop everything they're working on and jump on it pretty quickly. So Brett, I apologize. I realize it might not be realistic, but throwing it out there for discussion. And there is one follow-up to this once we've talked about this. That's some more funding.
Okay. And to be clear, so it's for projects that are raising awareness about zero emissions vehicles. So like just a promotion campaign of some sort of education campaign to get people. Okay. Any questions or comments on that from committee members about how we think we should proceed with this? Any opportunities that immediately come to mind? I see Kelly and then Emery, then Eric.
Well, is there an example of a project that would be helpful? Do you know, like for an example of a project? Because I can't quite connect the dots. Sorry.
Wolf?
So I'm sorry, you were asking that of me, Kelly?
Yeah, is there an example of type of project that could be?
Yeah, so through EV Society, we'll be applying to build an app that provides online education to consumers that aren't aware of what the possibilities are for moving to electric transportation or don't have clear answers. Multiple other cities are applying. The city of Sudbury, for example, is applying to this money again to just raise awareness of the capabilities that electric transportation bring, just to dispel some of the myths and raise awareness. So, I think what would need to happen fairly quickly is that we would need to look to what sort of education program the city of Barrie might want to develop for its residents. We don't have to develop it in the application period, but we have to define where there's lacking education that we get a gap we want to fill, and this program would pay for staff to actually develop that education program and deliver it.
I see on the website there under eligible projects, they provide a list of what the projects would look like. So developing and implementing a novel targeted outreach and awareness campaign about zero emissions vehicles, web-based resource and information portal, a test drive and trial program, operating or establishing showcase facilities, increasing workplace charging awareness among employees across multiple companies, increase physical and online visibility of charging infrastructure, increasing knowledge of EV charging options and tech in commercial fleets, developing curriculum and or training material. So I'm not sure which department in the city would be best for this. So if we do pass a motion, we should probably leave it somewhat broad. And it sounds like it's specific to like electric vehicles, not really looking at the active transportation side of things. So we might even direct that our communications department through Access Barrie look at developing just an education awareness campaign. That might be like the easiest thing to put together in a short period of time. Kelly, does that answer your question? Anything else? Any other questions or comments on that? No?
I'll just add, Keenan, that I'm not aware of anybody else that is building an education campaign around electric bicycles. So I think we could maybe have something creative to present to NRCan from the city of Barrie from that perspective that they'd look at and say this is a different angle and it's an important angle. And it is one of the things as you read through the application guide here, they're looking for innovative ways of educating the public through something that hasn't been done before, so that might just increase our chances of getting some funding.
Okay. I think I had Anne-Marie next, and then Eric.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to find a staff memo that I thought popped up a couple weeks back in the circulation list that might tie to EV. So I'll keep looking for that. But I was wondering, it was really a question back to staff to say, and thank you for the examples, Wilf. How could we move forward? On your last comment, Wilf, about education around EV, like electric bikes, I'm like, is this our gateway into being a bike-friendly city? Like, is this something that we can tie into a future application and already aligns to our work plan? So hoping to see if there's low-hanging fruit we can move on that's in alignment to current work plans and not miss this opportunity. So I wanted to open it up to staff to see if there was any comments about where this would best fit. Other than that, like offhand, I'm thinking about fleet around transit and then ops. And so I would hit both of those departments. And then from an accessibility, is this something that, others could echo if we could get something together quite quickly that then gets complemented. And without us sitting until mid-August to put in an application, if it's not coming through a city department, does it have to go through council? So also maybe that's a question to staff to say, could this just tie to a grant application that we do through the corporation, or does it have to go through council if it touches anything in particular? Lots in that.
Yeah.
Take what you want, but those are my quick thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not even sure if we have necessarily the right departments here at this meeting to answer some of those questions. So we'll probably have to follow up after the meeting. But yeah, it's August 16th is the deadline, which yeah, it's not easy to move. But Brett, I don't know if I saw you pop up earlier too, so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that piece, if it's something you've looked at or heard about.
No, and I think, yeah, there's a few different departments that might be more involved or better suited. I just did have a question though. I did see, maybe it's a complementary program, zero emission vehicle infrastructure program. And it looks like there's a deadline of September 8th, 2021. And this is more focused on, I believe, actual infrastructure, like charging infrastructure. And I just wonder, would that be a better, I'm not, so first of all, I'm not sure if we're looking at that as a something from fleet or through transit. And also maybe that might be a better focus just in consideration of the recent staff reports and presentations on conversion of some of the fleet to EV and some of the pilots that have been identified, whether even as small as maybe some of the small power equipment. I'm not quite sure of the details, but I just did want to pose that question to committee to see.
Yeah, it's my understanding, council did just approve the electrification of our transit fleet and the just the general fleet for the city too. And I think that was something that they talked about in the staff report, was accessing that funding. And I've talked to Brent Forsyth from Barrie Transit about that specific program, and it's something we've been monitoring and looking to apply for. So we've approved that strategy, and I can follow up with them. And I don't know if Mike has anything on that from Barrie Transit, but I think they're monitoring those funding opportunities and applying when they become available. But Mike, I don't know if you know if anything from Barrie Transit's going to be on that.
No, nothing to add on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah. Ron?
Oh, and if I can, Mr. Chair, if I could ask Wilf one more question. With your electric vehicle group, is there a potential that maybe you folks would be best suited? Would you be eligible to apply with support from the city for some of the elements? That would just be an idea that we could consider.
Brett, I'd be really happy to have that discussion with you and with the city. We are having it with some of the other cities across the country. So we haven't. This has all come down very quickly from the government. There's not been much notice, so we're really figuring it out as we're going. But reach out, happy to have the discussion and contribute and help in any way we can.
Definitely something for us to think about. I think we could be eligible. It does say community groups, municipal governments, or their departments or agencies. So I don't know if we really fit under the eligible recipients, but perhaps.
I think municipalities themselves do, Keenan.
Yes.
Yeah.
But a committee like this, I'm not sure how that would work. Because we don't really have a formal status, right? We're not a non-profit organization. So a group like ours. Anne-Marie, did you have something to add on that?
Only if there is any benefit to making a motion, whether it would leverage this or not, but getting it to city building, which is going to have a meeting, or that's directional. So at least it shows, although we're an advisory committee, is it a benefit to make sure that there's direction on record from this committee to supporting staff exploring this with Wilf?
Yeah, I was typing something out like that staff applied to the NRCan Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative for funding to create an education and awareness program to promote zero emission vehicle use, including but not limited to the promotion of electric bicycles. Do we like that general direction?
Wilf likes it. We'll take it. Open it enough, we can do something with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we might hear from staff that the timelines are too short, but I think it's worth passing along that direction.
As long as there's an opportunity, if it's necessary or appropriate, with the timing you mentioned, the council has a meeting on the 9th. So if we needed to get some motherhood endorsement or something from council, that could potentially be done at that meeting in order to make the time frame. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Emery, do you know when our city building?
I'm just looking right now on it. So we've got city building coming up on, I'm not seeing it's in there. We do have a meeting coming up though. 1 second, I'll look at that. But on the comment with respect to Al's, it may be a benefit to ask Wendy to put it on the agenda regardless, because typically with any grant, depending on who's submitting it, we need a letter of support. So we can already issue that if one's needed. That one can be done through the clerk's office with any type of grant submission. Usually that's a hiccup that happens. So I would get us on the 9th agenda.
Oh, that's good. I've never seen a council in the city of Barrie that was eager to turn down the potential for funding from other government levels. So, but sometimes if you got to have the paperwork on there, it's just good to have it covered.
Yeah, and that just covers us in case let's say that's the city that's not doing it directly. It's a partner that the application needs our support and our endorsement at a municipal level to access the funds. It's not a missed opportunity. So I'd say check with Wendy. Let's get it on there. We've done that before for pickleball applications, so it would follow suit.
That'd be great. Eric's had his hand up for a while, so I'm gonna put it in.
Yes, a couple of things. Living Green, we have our first electric vehicle show coming up on July the 31st at Heritage Park. That's a Saturday, and also we are mandated as an education organization, a public education. So certainly we could, I think, be an important partner with that and get a number of volunteers and line up a lot of volunteer hours as part of that. And we do have experience with past grants of tracking and monetizing time input. I guess once you monetize it, I don't know if it counts as volunteer, but we have a way of, we've had systems in place for tracking that and adding up the amount as a non-monetary contribution. So certainly we could play an active role in that side of fulfilling the grant.
Okay, yeah, I think there's an amazing opportunity there for Living Green, because the projects don't have to be delivered until March of 2023. So it's between April 1st, 2022 and March 31st, 2023, or before March 31st, 2022. So there's a pretty long time frame for actually implementing the promotion, whatever it is. I think Living Green would be a perfect fit since you're doing this electric vehicle show. Is that something, Eric, you want to bring to the board to discuss with them if they're not aware of this opportunity?
Yeah, if we get more details, I know in principle we'd be happy to sign off for that, but of course we'd need to see exactly what the commitments are and the time frame.
Right. Kelly?
Yeah, just quickly, I just want to say I heard Brett, and I love those ideas, Brett, about, I'm not sure if this would qualify, but the electric maintenance equipment along with the bicycles, as per Wilf's comment about innovation and new ideas. So, as a potential opportunity to funding around education, around reducing GHGs with our small equipment and our electric bicycles.
Absolutely. I don't know if the equipment would fit under the criteria, but I think bicycles, you can definitely make that case. Okay, so are we good with that motion that I read out? And then so we can see where staff can go with this in that short period of time, and then see if Eric can bring that to Living Green and see if they're interested in working with the city on that. Happy with that direction? Okay, can I have someone to move that motion?
Yeah, and I'll just pause. Eric still got his hand up. I'm not sure if that was another question before the motion.
No, I'll lower that, but we will need something like if you can detail the key points that I can present to the board. Yeah,
can definitely send the link. It's Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative on the Natural Resources Canada website. There's a bunch of detail there about who's eligible, what type of projects are eligible, and then time frame, etc.
Yeah, and also maybe a summary of what the specific I guess we don't know yet much about what we'd be proposing for Barrie.
Yeah, well, I think there's an opportunity for Living Green to actually access this funding independently too, if you wanted. So maybe that's something to bring to your board.
Right.
I think you're really well placed to do that. And then if the city needs to provide a letter of support, then
Sure.
we could do so. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, I mean, for example, we could use this year's EV event as a model and then apply for a grant to do a bigger, more impactful one next year, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you are very well placed. Living Green is very well placed to.
Yes,
make that
that'd be
happen.
brilliant. Yeah, with the lightly theme and you've already shown intention, and so I think it's great.
Hey, Eric, I'll just raise the awareness that you need to apply for at least $100,000.
That's okay.
All right.
So an action I would say on that item, Keenan, are you reaching out to Wendy around getting on the agenda? Or at least a flag that there could be some items coming up on the 9th?
Yes, I can do that. So reach out to Wendy to get it on the agenda. I guess that's sort of the backup since we might not have a city building meeting, right? So to pass it through there.
Yeah, it looks like September.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so for anything that's feeding up from this group, it would be September. We'd want to be getting on the agenda if relevant. But for anyone applying through this grant, depending on who the main applicant is, and if you need a letter, we need separate motions for Wendy for the August 9th meeting.
Okay.
And it might be then just making sure she's aware, because that would be, is that a special city council meeting? So it'd be a motion without notice. Anyway, she can identify. So we can get it through a general committee or a motion without notice.
Yeah, we'll make sure we have something.
And
Sure.
just to clarify, that's Wendy Cook, the city clerk, as opposed to Wendy Lovenmark, who's sitting here with her.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is in my wheelhouse because you
No,
can't
Wendy,
see her
you're off the
expression.
hook on this call. Yeah.
It's okay. I know the difference.
Well, I knew you did.
Thanks. Okay. Anne-Marie, did you move that? Or
I'll
Wolf?
move that. Yeah.
Okay. And Wolf, sorry, did you have something to add?
I would second that, and I do have a one last follow on for announcement when the time comes.
That's great. Okay. Any more discussion or questions on what's on the floor? No? Okay. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Okay, those opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Okay, Wilf, go ahead.
So I just want to level set that I won't have generous announcements like this every meeting. But while we're on a roll, if we order now, we get a free set of Ginzu knives because there is more money available. So the Trottier Foundation, which some of you might be aware of, charitable foundation, has a $100,000 grant that relates to electrifying school buses. We have a little bit more time on that. That deadline, I believe, is mid-September, but I would encourage the town to investigate perhaps applying to that, because that is from a sustainability environmental perspective, I'm just appalled that we're still sending kids out to stand next to tailpipes that are emitting diesel exhaust. So I'm not sure where the city fits into that, but I just like to raise that awareness. There's money there, and we should maybe consider taking a lead on school busing.
So I think the best place to bring that is to the Simcoe County Student Transportation Consortium, since they're the ones that actually run the school buses for all of Simcoe County. And I think it's both the Catholic and the public school boards that do that. Anne-Marie, did you have a thought on that? Sorry.
I think on that, but if they're not meeting, I was going to actually suggest, I think our staff might be aware of a direct contact to school boards that they use through that. So maybe it's, instead of waiting for a meeting, if that consortium's not meeting, that there might be a direct contact stuff might be there for each school board that sits on the transit conversations. I was trying to see if I could find it quickly, but I was wondering if Brett or if a member of staff might have that handy, we can share this information with, or see if that's information for Wilf.
I know Mike and Barrie Transit have been thinking about potential partnerships with the school board. Do you have a contact, Mike, with the consortium that may be interested in that funding?
Sure, we do have a staff member we talk to with respect to our ongoing coordination between our services.
Okay. Would you mind passing along a contact to myself, and then, or Wilf even? I don't know if you have Wilf's contact info if you're on this.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Keenan, whether this is EV Society is not going to apply on this one. But I wonder, the goal here is really to raise the awareness of the importance of converting our school buses, electrifying our school buses. So it is not a grant to buy school buses. It's not necessarily something that I think Simcoe may or may not be interested in applying for. It's really open to any organization that's interested in working towards raising awareness. So it kind of goes to the education piece again, and that's why I'm wondering whether the city of Barrie might be interested in exploring this.
Right. I don't know how the committee feels, if that's, I don't know what that could look like in terms of the city's role in promoting that.
So I know Sherry's been pulled off from the health unit and is active in that. So I'd recommend maybe that information being sent to her too and copied to me. And we can also share that with the health unit in case we've got a particular position on it, from an education awareness on other aspects too around their active walk to school, but also around environmental health and wellness, and some other pilot projects I think Sherry's been part of that tie to looking at safety in school areas. But from a, so if that hits the education piece, I don't even know the answer to the question about if the city would take a particular lens or would move it through the consortium, if staff would have a recommendation around where that fits. My understanding is if it talks a bit about any type of engagement around school fleet, it would be directed more specifically to those school boards based on their contracts, and we would have less influence on any type of change, but we could support education.
And if I can just jump in, Anne-Marie, this, I think the city's written, passed motions written to the provincial government in the past on phase out of gas plants and initiatives like that. I think this is really where this funding is targeted, is to raise awareness provincially that this is an important thing that we need to tackle together, and that the government needs to consider and be aware of. So this may just lead to a council resolution. You know, I'm not sure what form it takes, but there's potentially some money to fund staff or fund initiatives that will raise awareness.
And so what was the timeline on that again? Sorry.
I think it's September 10th, Keenan.
Okay. Anne-Marie, sorry.
I'm just wondering if that can be circulated, and then maybe we look to staff to say, can you leverage this, and do you need council support to do so? And then we don't miss the window again on the 9th if it needs to be fast tracked in order to access that. But if not, then maybe we can look at it through different hats around sharing it with the health unit, sharing it with the consortium, and also making sure that all stakeholders in this region are well aware of it. But from an education, I guess it would land from a communications and from a departmental work plan.
So in terms of next steps, just circulating it to relevant departments, the health unit, consortium, making sure everyone's aware that this is available. Is that kind of what you're suggesting, right?
I guess at minimum, and then from an access to funding, I guess I would assume to look to staff to see if you could leverage this funding if it ties in. Are you able to proceed? And maybe that's just an email back to us as an FYI. or do you need any type of council support to proceed to access the funds? And then we can make sure it's on the agenda again for August and or September in advance.
Okay. I'd be happy to do that, to circulate that and ask those questions of the relevant departments. I think got an idea of who could apply. Does that work for the committee? Yeah. Okay. All right, that's great. Thanks, Will. It's exciting.
That's all I got. I'll try hard for next month, but no problem.
You've set the bar high, Will.
Can't come bearing gifts of grants every month.
Okay, 12 minutes until our meeting ends. So I did skip an item, Parks Passport Pollinator Garden promotion. So I don't know, I can't remember who was taking the lead on this, if Wendy was going to speak to this, or what this was from a few months back too. So I can't remember what we were doing with this. Wendy, I don't know.
I think this was something to do with the initiatives associated with Bee City. So I talked to Stephanie about it before the meeting, and she says it's very much in the early steps, that Communities in Bloom does have the potential to engage residents by creating a parks passport. And there's a few things that still need to happen before we could launch this sort of promotion, such as mapping and the identification of pollinator garden types, some of this. And that Councillor Kungel had also provided a webpage link to the Couchiching Conservation Authority, and as a model for their type of passports. I don't know if Councillor Kungel would like to speak to that further.
Sure, and I can send that link to Brandy, but this came out of also some creative conversations from different pieces around our Pollinator Week being virtual this year. So it's able to connect around what are other opportunities for us to get residents engaged, and in general, how do we create that push and pull around residents interacting in educational opportunities in different parts of the city and what we have to showcase. Maybe that could be something that we look at in next year's work plan, if not this year's, but the concept was I volunteer with the Couchiching Conservancy, and so their Passport to Nature program, I think, has been showcased nationally at a conference, but also has taken off and brought in different topics and different experts. And so it's actually a free educational opportunity for families and residents to attend, and it's on different topics. And so I can send a link to that program, but it's also around, if we do have these showcase pieces, be it a particular feature at Sunnydale or a Monarch Way Station that exists, how do we actually invite individuals to explore certain parts of our green spaces and parks and feature that? And so, this was really a concept idea to say, maybe it's like a bingo where we actually ask individuals over the summer to maybe through Pollinator Week to launch off, but also then complement Communities in Bloom and other pieces and areas of Bee City. But how do we actually raise awareness and attention to those things and allow families wherever possible to participate through submitting a photo or visiting and actually sharing what they found? So there's a bit of a relationship or a connection around that. But then basically, I don't know how many people know about tall trees in Ward 3 as an example. And so there could be different pieces we want to be showcasing. The work, Al, that you've been doing around that subcommittee, other community gardens that have been actually brought together by Rotary and other groups. So there's also, some of our community gardens. So how do we bridge our programming to actually asking residents to take a bike route, so here are bike routes to 5 of these 10 areas. How did you get there? What did you see? And maybe that's a competition we can do to also help with wellness and physical activity. So did you take a 20-minute nature walk on Crompton? Did you find the way station in this area of a particular ward? And when you complete your Passport to Nature program, that's passive, right? That's an individual on their own accord, passively looking at, and kind of like a scavenger hunt. Passport to Nature program at the Couchiching Conservancy actually brings in experts and takes you into a specifically focused conversation and the educational conversation on different topics, from frogs to trees to nature to appreciating what's in a natural habitat. So I'd love to see that type of concept brought here. Maybe it's a relationship with them. Maybe it's something we do through Nature Berry. Maybe it's something that the city leads through a network, but where can we bring this conversation forward to look at how do we invite individuals more formally to take active transportation and actually guide them towards a key maybe attraction in the city. And that maybe could be a city award that we don't give out until now. So maybe it's something we start as a committee and it's a certificate that could be virtual, but it's a recognition about how we are supporting activation, education, and awareness.
Kelly, did you have some thoughts there? So
Yeah, Anne-Marie, you took the words right out of my mouth, because one of the key points that I was making when I was talking with the conference was about collaboration and how important that is. And so when we're talking about, you know, this passport to nature type idea, we need to also, as you said, Anne-Marie, think about the active transportation piece of that. So it's all linked together. So we're not kind of doing one thing over here with passport to nature, it's all linked. So here's your bike path, here's your walk path, and here's your bingo card to see all these great spaces and places, including what the quick wins on the short walks and short bicycle rides, the quick routes to convert people to walk and bike. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
okay, so Anne-Marie had a number of suggestions on, you know, how we can lead that work or work with other groups to get that work going. Does anyone have a thought on next steps on how we can move this forward?
If it's a bit too vague, I can see if this group is interested in having maybe someone present from Couchiching Conservancy on their Passport to Nature program, or less formally, I can share the link. But I think it's more around just bridging, you know, the conversations we had about, and we got down into kind of one pathway of conversation about strata and tracking data and mapping, but we did refresh our website. So now it's the next step around how we invite individuals to adopt and actually very conveniently take a walking pass or a bike pass to a particular location as kind of a incentivization to say, visit this place and this is what you're going to see. And you know what, we'd love to hear or get a photo about what you saw and what you took away from that place. And maybe it just creates a bit of a different connection and it pulls people into different parts of our city. So we can, yeah, it's more around like, so what's next for us? Is it a formal program? Is it something that can support, you know, initiatives that are city-based? So for Pollinator Week, for Bike Month. And then we have our own passport program, but it's all tied to city programming and themes and to our local conservation work and Nature Berry and other groups and maybe the Berry Garden Club. And each one maybe gets to kind of pick an area that they want showcased. And then that actually becomes something. I love what Living Green has done around their 10 months, right? So how do we also include that to help support that programming where they've done an exceptional job about talking about different themes? Treading lightly is what we talked about around the EV focus. And so what is the role of this committee around creating maybe something interactive for residents that help to push and pull people to an awareness of all of our programming and all of our different resources across the city around groups that are doing phenomenal pieces on our behalf.
So do we want to start that conversation at our next meeting with a presentation from Couchiching Conservancy so we get sort of everyone on the same page, and then we can have a conversation with them about how we can support and collaborate with them to bring that to Barrie in a bigger way? Like,
or share their learnings or what they'd recommend if we're thinking about something similar. So if there's agreement, I can reach out and see if that's something they've got capacity for or something that they would kind of recommend us kind of view. And then if there's interest, maybe it's on the agenda for the next couple of meetings in the fall to say, is there a Barrie passport program that we want to launch, and it's got so many things, and we look at activating it and trying it in 2022.
I like that approach. Any other thoughts? Okay, so we're clear on next steps on that. Next meeting, if we can, we'll have that conversation. Kuching Conservancy to have them share some of their experience with it, and then we can have a conversation about what we want to envision for Barrie. Kelly?
I can draft a model of this. I see it in my head for next time. If you like, Anne-Marie, I can draft a model of what that might look like. And
do you want to work on that together, Kelly? And then we can look at least maybe carving out a bit of, if we could protect half an hour, if there's not a lot of other competing demands, can we protect half an hour at the next meeting? And then we'll bring something back, but maybe between Kelly and I, it might be worth engaging them on kind of what's envisioned and getting some feedback too on that, and maybe informing that approach, and whether or not it's a formal presentation, we can identify if there's anything that they want to share back with us as we're looking at this.
sounds good.
All right.
Okay, perfect. Al?
Just a quick, since we're lining up for summertime now, just holding up a book here. Oh, good. That makes it really, it's called Finding the Mother Tree. It's by Suzanne Simard. I just finished reading this thing. It is, she's a forest ecology professor at the University of British Columbia. And it's a fascinating book, both as a personal story and as a professional one. And it really, it's made me start rethinking a lot about how we deal with forests, because her focus of her work over the last 40 years has been trying to learn and understand about all the interconnections between trees, how they essentially work through fungal networks in the soil, and connect, supply, nurture each other, communicate with each other. And it's quite fascinating, and I think it has a lot of benefit for how we think about when we talk about naturalizing park areas and things like that. I think there's a lot of good ideas in there that are worth thinking about applying to how you make, because it's how you make this stuff really work, as opposed to just going out and say, forestry has been about just going out and planting trees in little plastic tubes, and what happens is that most of them die, and they have to go back and be replanted. You have to understand what you're dealing with. And so I commend that to all of you. It just came out this spring, and it's a great read, and a lot of great food for thought.
Thanks, Al. That's great. Okay, we do have one more agenda item, and I realize it's noon, but I think we should have a conversation about this if everyone's okay. Ann Street bike lanes over the new Ann Street overpass. So we got an update from Brett on our last meeting that there were challenges. I do have some notes from him here too. There were challenges retrofitting the cycling infrastructure due to the narrow right way, numerous driveways, steep grade. So this corridor will continue to be identified for cycling infrastructure. We're currently looking at 2 alternative parallel routes as better solutions in the interim. And those are part of the Cycleberry infrastructure program that we were talking about earlier. So we're looking at both Sunnydale Road and Leacock, Edgehill, and Wellington. Okay. So Brett, I don't know if you want to speak to that a bit more about the timeline on that, if there's any opportunity to have the buffered bike lanes in advance of those connecting routes being implemented.
So the challenge is there's really no connectivity at this time. So really we'd be looking at erecting signs basically south of Edgehill Drive and immediately north of Donald Street. So it would just be the physical crossing itself. The crossing structure is going to have shoulders ranging from 2 to 4 meters. That is the location where the bike lanes will eventually be signed and painted. But these are locations that are already protected from vehicular traffic. So there's really going to be no material change with the cross section of the structure itself, there'll be a minimum 2 meters of protected space for cyclists on this structure. And then moving forward with the Cycleberry infrastructure program, we would look to convert those 2 cycling lanes, but that would be after Dunlop Street is reconstructed, the interchange, and likely after Bayfield Street's reconstructed, because Wellington would serve as a detour route. So converting that to 3 lanes would be problematic at this time. So would I be able to share my screen? I'm going to give it a try.
Sure. I think you should have the permissions. And,
okay. Can you folks see that map?
no. Have you pressed the share screen? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just caution committee that this is a draft map that I prepared for the Cycleberry infrastructure program to help the consultants prepare pricing. But this kind of illustrates the network we're looking at, and what we're seeing, or what we'd like to look at in the near term, is Sunnydale and Leacock as our alternates to full cycling facilities on Ann Street, because Ann Street will require very expensive retrofit, and that leads us down a path of prioritizing where we start doing these large infrastructure projects. So Ann Street wouldn't be, it would be, again, looking at our Bayfields, our S's, and our Young Streets to identify where we'll start with these very large retrofits. So what we like to do in the interim is, again, use Sunnydale Road, Letitia, Leacock, and then a combination of Edge Hill, Ann Street, and Wellington to make that bypass. So nothing is going to physically change on the bridge because it's been built for buffered bike lanes, but it's just a matter of the signage. So right now, because we don't have the connecting infrastructure on either side, and we won't be pushing these road diets forward until at least the Dunlop interchange is reconstructed, the thought process is that we'll leave this as is and then repaint it for the cycling lanes once it's we have the connecting infrastructure. But the physical space will be on the structure. So just to make it clear, this will probably make it less clear. Can you see this engineer drawing?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a little confusing, so
hard,
I apologize.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but
yeah. So anyway, so there, I'll flip back to the map, but there will be that defined shoulder space that will provide the same protection as a buffered bicycling lane. So it's just a matter of the signage is what we're talking about right now.
Is that like a best practice that we would leave it without the signage? Like, wouldn't adding, so I'm guessing the only difference is that, so there's not going to be signage, there's not going to be the actual bicycle icons in the lane. Is there an extra line that would be added to make it a buffered lane, or it's just the emblem in the lane and the sign?
There'll be emblem, there'll be an additional lane and some hatching, because we have somewhat of an asymmetrical cross section just because of the back-to-back left turn lanes. The decision at the time was made prior to even Cycleberry being conceived. Nothing really changes because of that, but that was the approach that we'll go with the urban shoulder for now. And then flip that to a bicycling lane, if that makes sense, even given a short distance in the future. That's the challenge. It's so short. So it's a kind of an odd isolated piece to call out as a cycling lane, but we'll be looking at that in further detail as part of Cycleberry, if that makes sense to upgrade that. But we are just being cognizant of the connecting pieces as well, and just how that fits in the overall detour strategy for the replacement of the interchanges.
Right. I'm a little confused why we would, if we're building the space on the shoulder, it's, as you're saying, it's going to be used by cyclists anyways. Would it not be safer for us to add the bike emblems and the signage so that cars are more aware that cyclists will be using that shoulder? And even if we don't have the connecting infrastructure, like wouldn't that add one little extra layer of awareness for drivers that they're sharing?
So it would be odd to have such a short section identified as a bicycling lane without any kind of infrastructure on Ann Street. So and given the volumes on Ann Street, it's a little challenging at the time. Now, what's changed with Cycleberry is we may be directing more folks deliberately to this. So that's something we'll look at as part of the Cycleberry infrastructure program, if we should accelerate that conversion, but we have to be cognizant of just how that might impact the detour routes itself. So we will look at that to see if there's any options, but that's been kind of the plan in place for the last couple of years. with the MTO for that structure.
Okay. Al, did you
Brett, could you just clarify what the buffered, you mentioned buffered bicycle lanes go, this is on the bridge structure itself, right?
Yeah, eventually we will paint in buffered bicycle lanes on the structure itself, and that is a 1.5 meter bicycle lane with a 0.5 meter minimum buffer.
So what is the buffer?
Line painting.
Line painting. It's not an actual physical. Yeah.
Man, that just seems, that's going to be there for 50 to 100 years. And that just seems so inadequate for what we're trying to do. And it's not a personal criticism at all, Brett, but I mean, I don't know that there's a better solution, but you know.
So that's part of the challenge with these as design standards change and when we start getting into milestone decisions on the infrastructure. So when these are conceived back in 13, 14, 15, it really was a different environment as to what was appropriate, and it was following recommendations based on our past transportation master plan. So as much as we'd like things to be much more immediate, similar to the Harvey Big Bay Road, there's design decisions that are locked in for quite some time. So that's the challenge with this infrastructure. So going forward, that's basically, what's the word? More of a legacy approach, but it's locked in. So Ann Street itself, if we were looking at cycling infrastructure on Ann Street, more than likely we'd be looking at some sort of cycle track or in boulevard pathway system, one way, unidirectional, as kind of the best practice. And then we move to this section. And then what we'd probably see is potential retrofit with potential bollards if we can address the maintenance issue in the winter. But that's just kind of the reality of these design projects that just for committee's benefit, typically can take 8 to 10 years from conception to implementation. So it is very challenging. So it's important to kind of recognize that aspect. So that's just a bit of the history and some of the challenges just as practices evolve and just where we get caught sometimes where milestone decisions have been made and we have to move forward with them.
Yep.
It's a very frustrating process. It seems like it's just going to end up costing us more in the long run too, because we'll have to retrofit the infrastructure that we're currently building to create that separate cycle track. And I wonder whether it's a better trade-off to, maybe take some time to redo some of the design work for these projects. I realize it's a little late for the Ann Street Bridge, but Eric, I see your hand.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I'm confused about, so I'll put both of them out there and then let Brett, through you, answer them in the order or as makes the most sense. The first one is I thought I'd understood from our previous meeting that the road diet for Edge Hill was scheduled for sort of the next 18 months. But I think you were saying today it would be after the overpass is completed. So I just wanted a clarification on that. And I'm looking at the part of Edge Hill from Ann to Ferndale, the closer to downtown side of it. And then the other thing is with the overpass, the Ann Street overpass, while Ann Street to the north and south of there is not part of the identified cycle route on the map, it is the only way for the east-west route, which was on the map from Edge Hill across to Wellington. That's the only way for that route to cross the 400. So it would seem that, that the overpass is a part of that route. It's just not an Ann Street route, but it's the only way to get there. The Ferndale bike thing, nothing extended farther south than Dunlop on the west side of that map. Anything west of Ann Street didn't seem to extend down and across on the map that you had showed on the screen. So it looks like the Ann Street overpass is the connection for those other routes, even though most of the route is not on Ann Street. So I wonder if you could clarify that, please.
Yeah, so the Edge Hill Road diet, we'll have a look to see, just as long as we're not removing lanes, we might be able to put that in place a little bit sooner. But the Wellington Road diet 4 to 3 lane conversion, that would be one that we'd have challenges with the detour route. So I might have just misspoke on that specific element on Edge Hill, but we'll just see, as long as we're not impacting the vehicular capacity of this route, especially when we're doing the interchange replacements, we might be able to move that one a little bit faster. As far as, yeah, the east-west connections, yeah, the next connection is Tiffin Street. So Ann Street is an important connection, as well as Sunnydale Road. So yes, you are correct at that.
Kelly?
So Brett, Harvey Road, when I
Yes.
went took my car over that, there's really good looking bike lanes. They're very well defined, but they end at all kinds of places. There's no continuation. So I don't know if that was obviously part of the program, but when I think about Ann Street and potentially putting those lanes in similar to Harvey Road that look beautiful, I don't know if it's something we can rethink, because with Harvey Road, there's so many places to go, but no bike lanes to get there. It kind of just, flows over the highway and kind of ends, whether it's on Fairview or there's no connecting to the Harvey Road bike lane over the bridge.
Yeah, so the Harvey Road, I should bring up a different map, but right now the bike lanes extend from Essa Road, and I believe they extend to Bayview and drop off. When the city goes to reconstruct Bayview to Huronia, there'll be cycling lanes on that stretch as well. And then conversely, on the other side of the road, that connects into the existing multi-use path on Essa Road. And then that'll connect into kind of the lower volume subdivision to the west of Harvey Road, which will tie into our interim kind of signed route that will provide connectivity up to Tiffin. And this also provides connectivity towards Mapleview Drive. And the hope is to get this extension built sooner than later to Mapleview Drive, but that's being tied to the urbanization of the existing 2-lane cross section. So hopefully we do have a development in the works here. So hopefully that moves forward, because that will help accelerate this project. But right now this is scheduled, I believe, in the 2030 timeframe for this gap. But that's the network of Harvey, Big Bay in this area. Oh, and just following up on Fairview Drive, we are looking at an EA for that project in the early, I'd have to pull up it on Questica, pull up the scheduling, but I believe that's going to start in the 23 or 24 timeframe as well. And that'll provide cycling lanes from Harvey down to Little, which has already been approved for a road diet, to get cycling lanes on that as well. And then that will tie into our network in this area. And then eventually, more longer term, we're hoping to get cycling infrastructure to ESSA and then on ESSA itself. But that, again, because of corridor constraints, are longer term objectives.
Did I answer your question, Kelly?
I guess I was kind of using Harvey Road as an example of bike lanes that exist now, brand new ones that don't really connect, versus not having them on Ann Street because they don't connect. I was kind of trying to link those two. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the plan there is and I guess you're drawing the comparison that why did we do the bike lanes on Harvey versus Ann Street? There is no plan on Ann Street at the time of that decision, or even now really, to retrofit Ann Street. We have nothing in our 10-year capital plan because we're focusing on these other more important corridors. But since then, we have identified this east-west route that will utilize Ann Street, that short section. So what I mentioned previously is we will be looking at that change through Cycleberry to see if it makes sense to upgrade that sooner rather than later through that process.
Okay. Eric, is that a leftover hand, or do you have something else?
Leftover, sorry.
Okay. So I think we do have an opportunity to dig into this more when the Cycleberry infrastructure program comes forward. We're working against a strong car culture in the city, so it's I don't know, it's very frustrating that, you know, it seems like cycling infrastructure is not the priority. And I think that's because it wasn't in the past. And I think that's shifted now, but some of these decisions are locked in. But I think there's opportunity for us to maybe push for some acceleration on some of these connected routes when that program moves forward. Recognizing that we're a little over our time, is there anything else that people had to address before the meeting ends? Oh, kind of a little rushed today, so I apologize for that. We're looking good. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to all the staff who are here. I really appreciate your time and answering our questions. Brandy, are we good? Do you need anything from us before we adjourn?
No, I'm good. If I need anything, I know how to get a hold of you.
Okay, thank you so
Will
much.
we have an August meeting, Ken?
We don't.
Okay.
Yeah, so our next meeting will be in September. But we can provide an update on those things we talked about that will be going to the August 9th council meeting. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Meeting is adjourned. Take care and stay safe. Bye.
Bye, everyone.